All right, everyone. This is the start of a new week, so remember we're going to have to do a poll from the Git repo. I have up on the screen my terminal that is on last week, and we can go ahead and do this together this week so that the TAs and I don't going to walk around to 5 machines and fix problems, hopefully. We probably still will have some, but that's okay. Or maybe everyone's got it already, and that would be amazing. But if you don't, we'll go ahead and walk through it together. So if I go ahead and run git status, this is in the GitLab repo that we use for class, right? You can see I've got a problem. I have this 06 Ajax folder, which coincidentally is the name of the folder I'm about to pull down for this week's activities, but that's beside the point. It's something that I've done in this repo that I don't necessarily want. Now, if you do want the stuff, don't do exactly what I'm going to do. I'll tell you what not to do. But you can follow these first steps. So first step, we're going to go ahead and type git stash include untracked. Okay, that is going to take all of our stuff and stash it away. If I run status again, I have nothing. I should see something along the lines of your branch is behind origin master by some commits. In this case, it's 1. And can be fast forwarded. If it says it can be fast forwarded, you're in luck, because exactly what I'm going to do is fast forward, and it's the easiest path. If it does not say that, well, we're going to hope for the best. If it does not say that, I want you to run the second command. I'm going to tell you, not this first one. So the first one, if it says and can be fast forwarded, you're going to run this: git poll --ff -only. Just like that. This is fast forward only. What that means is we're just going to take all the new stuff that's on the repo and put it on our machine. Nothing else. Boom. So I'll enter my credentials. And pull down a whole bunch of crap. If yours did not say to fast forward only, you're going to do git poll --rebase. Like that. And you're going to run that bad boy instead. Anyone got to run that? Go back to what? This one? That's the one you probably want to run. Git poll --ff -only. All right. If you have stuff that you, yeah. Okay. If the stuff you stashed in that first step, if you want it back, you're gonna go do git stash pop. If you want it gone, you're going to do git stash drop. Oh, really? Yep. If you want it back, you pop it. If you want it gone, you drop it. And I dropped it because I didn't want it. Anyway, if I do git status again, it'll say your branch is up to date with origin master. Nothing to commit. Working tree clean. That means we're good to go. All right. So, with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and start class. So the first thing we're going to do is spend a few minutes warming up. Activity number 1 in week 6, called customer object There's an unsolved in there. Go ahead and pull that bad boy up. And we're going to spend about 5 minutes doing that. Like I said, is warm up. All right. So that was our warm-up today. We're going over objects a little bit more here in this warm-up because we're going to start talking about Ajax and JSON today. Now, JSON will probably sound more daunting than it is. If you're comfortable with objects, you'll be comfortable with JSON. If you're not comfortable with objects and how to access their properties and stuff, then we're going to have to get a little bit comfortable with JSON as well. But this structure that we see in the objects is exactly the structure that you see in JSON. So it's very, very similar. Okay. So log the first name below using console.log. Peyton, how do I do that?
Console.log customer.firstname.
Exactly. Nice. All right. Michael, how do I do the last name?
Console.log customer.firstname.
Nice. Solid. The state of the address. Justin. Just to put you on the spot, man. Okay, so let's start with the console.log. So what we're looking for is the state of the address, right? So if we look through the customer object, the last two examples, we were logging the first name and then the last name, and we access those with the dot, right? So customer.first name was John, customer.last name was Smith. So first things first, we need the address. So we could probably start with customer.address, okay? Customer.address. However, if we were to console log that, you would see street address, city, state, postal code. And that's more than we were asked to get. We were asked just to get the state. So the address is an object itself, meaning we could probably get to its inner properties using what, Justin? A dot, just like in the customer object. So if we want to console log the state of the address, what do we got to do? Dot state. Nice. Okay, we want to console log the home phone number using, or we want to console log the home phone number. Adam, how do I do that? Customer dot phone number square bracket 0 dot number. Exactly. And Nor, why did we have to use the square brackets here instead of just a dot? Because it's in an array, and we want the what element?
First element.
So we use a
0.
Exactly. Nice. So the last one is to get the fax number. Heather, how do I get that?
So you're going to do the same thing, but in the square bracket. Ooh, are you? Let me think about that. It's still within the. Yeah. So with the fax number, so would it be 2 in the bracket? Instead, I don't know, the curly braces and that kind of screwed me up.
Yeah, the curly braces are confusing because they're objects in an array. But the fax number is the second item in the array, so how do we get the second item in an array?
2 instead of 0.
We do 2 instead of 0?
Mm-hmm.
Why 2?
Because home is 0, 1 is number 2 is fax. Right?
1 is number 2, right?
Oh.
So you said it just now. We put 1 there, right?
Yeah.
Yep, the second index is always a 1 because it's 0 based.
Yeah,
Nice. Solid. Okay, so on objects, Fist of 5. How are we feeling on objects? Just object access. You don't gotta know much else about them. How we get to properties. You feeling okay? Okay, mostly feeling okay. You gave 5? Nice, man. I like it. I like it. Good. Okay, great. So remember, the dot, the period, the dot accessor is our friend here. You take the variable name of your object, and you put a period, and then you can get to all of its child properties, right? If that property, like address here, happens to be an object, you can go ahead and use another period and get to its child properties. If it happens to be an array, access it like you would an array. And if the index, the element at that index, happens to be an object, again, you get to use the dot accessor to get to its children. So phone number element 0 right here is this bad boy, which is an object because it's in the curly braces. So a dot gives us access to type and number. And that's how we can get to it. Nice. So the TAs will slack out the solution to that. It is exactly this. And we're going to go ahead and move on. So there is a link that I'm going to send you all, and you're going to need to use Chrome. There's this thing called the JSON formatter. I hope that link. So I can't, I'm using Firefox right now, but I'll at least show you. It's going to look something like this, but in Chrome it'll actually let you install it. Go ahead and install that because we're going to be working a lot with JSON. And JSON is funky. And sometimes you want to, have easy formatting abilities because it can get real messy when you're pulling from APIs. Go ahead and add the extension. Nice. Added to Chrome. Sweet. So anyway, it's an extension we use in the browser. Basically, it's just going to help format the JSON blobs we're about to run into, which will be very, very nice. Okay, so that being said, there's this website we're going to take a look at called Mongo Scraper. And Mongo Scraper is an interesting little app because it has a bunch of articles. I can go ahead and clear them. No articles, but I can hit this Scrape New Articles button, and you'll notice that this changed down here. A bunch of articles appeared, and they're legitimate articles that you can click on and open up. It's in the New York Times. Just about stuff, politics, whatever. It's a pretty interesting little app that I'll slack out to you guys in a little bit. But the point is, there are ways on the internet to use just JavaScript from your browser to be able to get information from effectively anywhere, assuming it has an API. This is kind of our first experience with APIs. I'm not going to explain them much yet, but the gist is this Mongo Scraper, when you click Scrape New Articles, will refresh your articles. In this case, it's not doing a whole lot after I've already scraped them. It'll change my DOM here because it gets something from this API, this magical API thing I'm talking about, so that we can get to these articles, which is pretty cool. So if I go ahead and look at the raw API output, I have what are called JSON blobs. Let me go ahead and open up this link in Chrome for you all. New window, so we can see what the JSON formatter. Alright. Oh no. Okay, so this might look more familiar in the Chrome browser. You might remember sometimes when we're playing with the console here in class, we'll have an object or something and we'll console log it like the window, and you'll see these curly braces, and then you'll see some property names, and then you'll see the values associated with those property names. Right? Sound relatively familiar? We've seen it a couple of times. You may not remember it exactly, but that's okay. This is what JSON looks like. Very, very familiar to JavaScript. Very similar, right? So right here we have an angle bracket, which denotes an array. There are 13 items in this array. And then each of those items in the array, just like we saw with the telephone numbers, happens to be an object, as denoted by the curly braces here. Right? And you can go ahead and collapse them. Inside each of those objects, you will see properties, colon, a value. Now, one thing to note is all of the property names, in this instance, have double quotes around them. There are no property names that are not quoted. The reason why is in raw JSON. Whoops. Oh, I just dropped my wedding ring. I fiddle with my ring a lot, and so I drop it. I almost dropped it behind a stall at a restaurant the other day. It was really bad. Yeah, she would have been pretty happy about that. Anyway, the JSON here, JSON's format requires the property names to be wrapped in double quotes. They are strings, always. Always double quotes, not even single quotes. You must use double quotes. And then a colon, just like in JavaScript object notation, and then the value. There are 3 types of value, well, 5 types of values, just like in JavaScript, okay? So your primitives are a Boolean, true or false, written as true or false, no quotes. Strings, written as strings with double quotes only. Numbers, written with no quotes as raw numbers. Then you can have other objects, like so. And then you can have arrays, like so. Those are the 5 things you can get in JSON. Some serializers, I can't remember if null is considered a valid value or if they just leave the property off. I can't remember. We'll deal with it when we get there. But anyway, just note that your property names, double quotes, there are no single quotes in the world of JSON. However, the rest of it is very, very similar to JavaScript. Not as forgiving. You can't use stuff like comments and all that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the last link, and I'm going to share this link, and I want everyone to just take like 5 minutes to go ahead and we're going to just play with these APIs. Go ahead and open the Chrome browser, the development tools, and kind of like experiment looking at what's going on over the network tab, stuff like that. See if you can't play with some of the stuff coming back in the console, so on and so forth. So just spend, oh yeah, if you don't have the JSON formatter, you get this fun blob. And if you have questions while you're looking at this, feel free to ask. I'll do my best to answer them. And go ahead and talk about things amongst yourselves. Yeah, Norm, you got a question?
How did you get this from the first link that you put up?
This is not from the first link. This is from the second link.
I know, like.
Oh, how do I get this from the first link?
How do you get this like articles? Or start from zero?
Ah, I see. So if I go ahead and I go to the main page, okay? We're going to talk about it today. That's what today's class is about, how this stuff happens. But if I were to look at the main page and I were to look at the JavaScript here, there's a whole bunch of crazy code in here, specifically right at this point right here with the $.get that helps us get this information. That API page that we're just on, /API/headlines, is like the raw view of all the stuff that this JavaScript is manipulating. So this is a good question. But yeah, we're going to talk about APIs a lot today. Should be pretty fun.
So is this an API? What are we looking at?
This is the data coming back from the API. You use an API to get this data. How do I get into the API code?
I can't seem to like.
Or how did I get this screen? The second link that I posted to the API/API/headlines takes you here. So if you go ahead and look at that. Using the dev tools, you're not going to be able to perfectly replicate this.
Are those buttons at the top? Is that the JSON formatter?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, if you didn't have the JSON formatter, you'd get the raw view, which is, you know.
Just as easy to do.
Yeah. So playing off of this, I'm going to post some instructions for you. I want you to work together, spend a few minutes researching what an API is. What is an API? What does it stand for? What are some examples of APIs, except for this, of course. Don't use this one. And what do these specific APIs allow you to allow you as a developer to do, right? So try to first do some research on what an API is and why we would use it, and then go ahead and try to find some, or think of some that might exist that we would need. Don't if you're going to randomly name it off, you got to tell me what it's used for. And how it's used. We'll discuss it. Do your research first, then tell me.
That's a good one.
Can I get a ale, pale, So is Google Maps like an API then? It's not like Google Maps is an API. API is part of the server that receives the request.
So it's pulling
So like when
information
you go
from
to
that area.
like Facebook.com or whatever, request to the server. And then the API receives the request and sends back whatever the
That's the source of it.
data. Right, it sends the data to whatever you're pulling. That will then return to the browser. So an API would really only be on that server. Right? Here is think of an API as a waiter in a restaurant. Right. If it says you give your waiter, you give your waiter the order, the waiter goes to the kitchen and tells the chef, hey, I need all of this processed. And then when it's done, it comes back to you. So the API is going to be like the middleman in a way. Right? It's the middleman between whatever you're requesting the data from or wherever the data is. So it returns it to you. Yeah, in an array. That was layman terms. Waiter in a restaurant now, she doesn't get any Alright, so it's like Starbucks, right? You go to Starbucks, you use the cashier your order.
Yeah.
The cashier doesn't make anything. She puts the cup on the weight line, right? And the other guy sees your cup and says, oh, they're requesting this beverage. They're making it. And then I guess like that one's a little less because nobody gives it back to you. But
I work with API keys a lot at work, but I don't really know how to generate
Okay, let's talk about APIs a little bit. What is an API? Anyone? Anyone?
let's go back up. Application Programming Interface.
It is an application programming interface. That's what it stands for. What is it?
It's like a waiter at a restaurant.
It's like a way. Yeah. Gonna go into an analogy. Okay, give me your analogy, Rolando.
It's like a waiter in a restaurant where as you give The waiter then goes to the server/kitchen and gives them the order, and they process all the data, making your food, and then they give it back to the waiter, and the waiter brings it back to you.
Yeah, that's not a bad analogy. Yeah, okay, we can give him a round of applause for that. Yeah, that's not a bad one. That's very good, yeah. So, did you Google that analogy too? Did you Google that analogy too?
No, we were just talking.
Okay, good.
I googled the first
Good,
part
good,
of it,
good.
and he just made up the rest. Well, yeah, he gave me the idea, and I rolled with it.
Yeah, so that's a great analogy. So an API, what it is it's kind of a way that you can it's a program. You can tell it some stuff you want, and it'll go get it for you. How it gets it is a mystery. Where it gets it from is a mystery. You don't really care. You just know that if you go to this API, you can say, hey, I want this thing, and it'll be like, all right, here you go. Usually in the form of JSON. Not always, but lately that's kind of been the case. So what are some specific examples of APIs then? Nor?
There's Google Maps.
Google Maps has an API, yes.
Hold on. There's Flickr. There's
Flickr has an API.
Google Plus API.
Google Plus has an API. Are you reading off a list right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Meetup.api.
Yep.
There's a Tumblr.
Yep. Okay, those are all great examples of APIs. YouTube has a great API. Yeah, every time you see a video embedded on a web page, can be from an API. Sometimes it's just from like an iframe link, but it's kind of an API. But all of those that Nor gave us are good examples of APIs. And what do these specific APIs allow you as a developer to do? Well, Google Maps allows you to get location data about pretty much everything in the world right now, right? So it has an API somewhere, and you can make a request to it over HTTP and say, hey, look, Google Maps, I need to know where this address is. I need to know how far away this address is and how far it's going to take me to get there if I walk. Stuff like that. You can just tell it, and it'll tell you the result through magic. So that's effectively what an API is. So I was trying to think of a way I could draw it out. So I found this little app here, and we'll see if it's helpful. But basically, on the web, and most websites are built this way these days, you'll have a magical API somewhere, and it looks like this beautiful circle, okay? Yeah, A, that's an A, P, I. It was hard to use, so I prefer this. Anyway, so here's our API, right? And somewhere else in the world, there's a web page. We'll make it a square, kind of. Okay, and this is our web page. And we're like, hey, API, say it's Google Maps. I want to know where an address is and how far to get there. So you're like, okay, I'm just going to have my web page. Go ahead and hit this. Now, they're unrelated. This web page is hosted somewhere else. It could be hosted on your local machine even. Doesn't matter. And this API is just somewhere out in the internet, in the ether, right? And the API is like, cool, bro, I got you, and sends you back some information, right? But at the same time, as my website is calling that API, it turns out Rolando's website is also doing it. And so is Heather's website. And so is Nor's website. All at the same time. Because APIs are amazing. And they're separated from the traditional web page, right? They're literally just an endpoint that anyone can hit at any time and get data back. That's kind of what they look like on the internet. If you could visualize the bits, it'd look like that. Trust me. Take my word for it. But anyway, that's kind of the point. APIs are really great because they give you a well-defined interface for getting data or manipulating data. Something along those lines, right? And you can isolate it somewhere to make it easy to access for everyone. And kind of like take a bunch of functionality and put it in one place and make it easy to get to. That's kind of the point of an API. That's why they even exist. Any questions on APIs?
What's your favorite API that you use?
What's my? That is a really weird question. I don't know. I use a bunch of APIs from day to day. What's the best? What is the best API? GitHub actually has probably one of the best APIs I've ever used. GitHub, and I'll show you, that's a good one. GitHub API. So usually what happens is, for instance, GitHub, you can go ahead and go to this GitHub API version 3, right? developer.github.com/v3. And they're talking about their REST API, and we'll learn more about that later. It's a type of API. And basically can come here and be like, oh, well, you know, I wanted to go ahead and I wanted to get all the Git data related to one of my repositories. Well, I can get all of the blobs in the repository. And to do that, you just have to submit a request to this /repos, and this is the owner name, so this would be CJ Howard92. Right here, colon the repo name, so that would be, I don't know, say I have a test repo, /git/blobs, and then the file SHA, if you happen to know the SHA in Git, which I don't expect many of you to know off the top of your head, as I wouldn't. But it looks something like this, right? And this is the response you would get back. Here's an example. So if I made a request, CJ repos /CJ Howard92 /test repo /git/blob /some SHA, I get this back. It tells you the encoding, it tells you the full URL, tells you the SHA, tells you the size of the file. If I wanted to create a blob, say I wanted to add something to my Git repo, I could make a request here with a post request over HTTP. Now again, I don't expect you to know much about HTTP methods like post and get and put and all that. And I don't expect you to understand what I even mean by making a request, because we've never done that in JavaScript. Granted, we're going to do it here in a little bit. The point being, I can send some JSON, boom, right here, that's JSON, valid JSON blob, to GitHub, and it'll do some stuff on my repos for me. I don't have to even do it manually. I don't got to push manually. I can literally just tell the API, this is what I want to change. That's the beauty of these kinds of things. Now, this one's really good for a lot of reasons. This one's really good because it's well documented. I can come in here, see all the responses. I can see what a good response looks like. It looks like a 200 OK. I can see information about it. Blobs up to 100 megabytes in size. They have all kinds of different things you can look up. They have an extremely thorough API. So, okay, hey, I want to get everyone's email address. I can go in here, read all the docs on how to get emails. Okay, so their API is great for a lot of reasons, but mainly because it's so well documented and it adheres very well to the best practices of a REST API. So this is REST API version 3. As we learn more about REST, we'll learn a little bit about the best practices associated with REST, and GitHub pretty much is a shining example of that. GitLabs is okay. A really bad one would be the Microsoft VSTS, so Visual Studio Team Services, is probably one of the worst APIs I've ever worked with. On the other hand, and it does the same thing. It hosts repositories like GitHub and GitLab. It's just, you know, Microsoft. So what can you do? They kind of suck sometimes. But anyway, this is an example of what, if I was a developer and I said, hey, I need to go work with this API, what am I going to do? I'm going to Google the something related to the API. So in this case, I'd be like GitHub API docs or something. And it'd bring me here. What's up, Andy?
So maybe this is a stupid question. So is this like dropping cookies?
Is this like what?
Dropping cookies?
Dropping cookies.
So like when you're talking about email addresses, is this like prompting people to enter the email address, or?
Ah, that is a good question. No, it is quite automated in comparison. So what you're asking about is like, hey, I go to a web page, it says we have cookies or something, or hey, we need your email address for tracking or something along those lines, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this one's like, I want to get all the email addresses of all the people in my company who work on this repo. How would I do that? Well, I can ask GitHub, because GitHub hosts all of the repository information. Just so it turns out that I can do the /users if I happen to know their username, and I can make a request to this /users endpoint for every user. In this case, it would be, you know, whatever user this is, but say it was me. And you get all this information back about the user. So if I wanted to build an app that could take in a bunch of GitHub usernames, for instance, I could do this with all of yours because I know them all from Bootcamp Spot, right? Say I took all of your GitHub usernames, I could build an app probably in like 20 or 30 minutes that could use all of those and get all of your GitHub information that's available. I can't get everything. I can't get your passwords and stuff like that, right? I can't get anything that's insecure. But if you've marked it as available on your GitHub profile and I make a request to this with your username, I'm going to get it back, assuming I'm a valid authority, right? So there's another thing with APIs. People have been mentioning API keys. Almost every API has an API key or an idea around an API key, and that is basically that if you want to use the API, you have to go ahead and authorize through the API somehow. Now, this is pretty complex how it all works, but just know there's a process when you're talking to an API where you either have to already have a key or you have to be given a key. And what do I mean by a key? It's usually a really long string of characters, numbers, and letters that you put somewhere in your URL or in your HTTP header to say, hey, I need access to this API. And when the API receives your requests, it says, hey, is this API key legit? It checks it. If it's not legit, it says, too bad, sucks for you. If it is, then great. It sends you back whatever data you asked for. So we'll run into that too. The important points to remember here, and I'll get to you in just a moment, Alex. Important points to remember about APIs are they are separated applications somewhere else on the internet that you can use to get data easily from anywhere else in the internet. What are you going to say, Alex?
Is there any difference between API key and API token?
An API key and an API token, that's a good question, yeah. No, they're not. They're not always the same. So I would think of an API key as something that's static. So say I work for Trilogy, we'll run into this in an exercise we do later. They may say that your API key to GitHub, for instance, is always Trilogy. But you also need an API token. You need to log into the API and get a valid token back before you can continue. So you need a combination of both. API keys are static. They're given out. Usually one time. API tokens are not. Yeah?
Do you have to pay for a key?
Do you have to pay for a key?
Something.
Depends on the service. GitHub, all of this is free. You can log in and all that for free as long as you know how to set it up. Google Maps, I think, recently has changed their pricing, so yeah, it's pretty pricey. To have a key that usually what happens is with an API is you get a key back, you can get one for free, and they'll say you can use this to get 50 requests. It's like a trial, right? Yeah, 50 requests per month or something. Yep, and then as soon as you hit the 50 requests, it's like, nope, can't do this anymore until you buy a key. Then you have to buy a better key. So that's how you can do like pricing stuff through APIs. It's pretty easy, actually. Any questions on APIs before we move on? I'll show you a couple more.
So that information, that's just the data, like kind of in the API? Or?
This is an example of what it would look like when you got it back in JavaScript. So if I made a call, a get call, which we'll show gets in a little bit. If I make a get to application / grant / with a grant ID, I'm going to get a JSON response back that looks like this. So remember here, this is our JSON response to some API call, okay? So when I hit the scrape news articles on that web page, I get this back. Don't worry about the code that does it right now. Just know that there is some code that says, hey, API, I need some data back. And this is the crap I get back. The same thing goes for GitHub. I say, hey, GitHub, I need to know all the application grants. Here's some of the crap I would get back. This is an example. This is the shape of the object you get back so you can know what to look for inside of that object.
Right.
That becomes very important.
I was kind of thinking if we ever built like our own like big website or something, and say like there's a lot of users or something, you say like I want to get all the users for my own website, like what API would you use? Like our own or?
Yeah, you can build your own. Actually, a lot of websites today are built that way. I'm building one right now at work that's two parts. It's an API where we do all of our work, and then it's a static website written with Angular. So it's one HTML page with a bunch of JavaScript. And they're two separate websites hosted in two different places that talk to each other through traditional API means. So, any other questions on this stuff? I'm going to show you a couple APIs. Cool. Alright, so if you go to market.mashape.com, something like that, you can go here. There's a bunch of APIs that exist on this website. So if I type in Yoda translator, I'll find the Yoda translator. Now the other thing that sucks with this website that I didn't know, but I know now, is that you have to sign up. But you can sign up with your GitHub account, which makes it a little easy. But anyway, if I go to this Yoda translator, it'll be a good example of an API and the way it works, and seeing how it works. Okay, so we have this weird page that I can't make any easier. Converts English to Yoda speak. So if I click here, it's going to ask me to sign up. I can click the sign up with GitHub, which uses the GitHub API to sign me in. That's a whole different ballpark, but we'll talk about it near the end of class.
So is that using API?
Oh my gosh, my user. I don't know if I want to do this. Their SSL tokens are invalid. Bastards. Okay. Well, I don't really want to do this.
Report it.
You've been compromised.
Report it.
Okay. I'm going to skip that one because I'm not going to sign up for anything that's got an invalid SSL certificate. And you shouldn't either. If you ever see that, you should just walk away. So anyway, what I was going to show you is that you can go ahead and make requests to that API and get responses back. Let me see if I can find another example online that's good like that and has a good API. Come on, let's see. Oh well. Anyway, let's skip that one. Another example of an interesting API and how it works is this one right here. So this one actually takes pictures of faces and analyzes them and gives you information about them. Kind of weird, but it exists. So anyway, this API has this picture of this lady and says one face has been detected. It got a unique face token. Click the face image to check the detected results, right? So there's this face API. It tells you the estimated age of the person, the estimated gender, whether or not they're smiling. So there's a threshold of 50. The value is 0.104, so they do not think that she is smiling. And I wouldn't say she is. The head position relative to her neck and her body. So this blue would be like her face, right? The emotion, neutral. The ethnicity, white. And then whether or not she has glasses. No glasses. It's pretty interesting, right? And then right here, there are two faces detected. It's like this dude, he's really smiling. He's old, he's male, and he's really smiling, right? His head position was like relative to his head. He looks pretty happy. He's white, and he has no glasses. And then, if you want to look, you can actually look at the JSON that comes back to tell us all of this. So this is what their API is sending back. It's a lot. There's a lot of information about this white dude's face.
Is this like an algorithm that just pulls out certain parts of their face and then maps it?
Yeah, so this API is exactly that. It takes an image, it uses some image parsing algorithms to determine where a face might be, and you can see by the blue dots all over his face what it's estimating, and then makes some guesses about that picture based off of what it finds in the face. So an API is good for that, right? You can take a really complicated algorithm, you can wrap it in an API and make it accessible to everyone. Now if I wanted to do a face detection application or something, I could do that without having to know anything about face detection or image parsing or anything like that, right? I wouldn't need to know anything, and frankly I don't know anything, and I have no interest in learning anything about those things. So I could use an API like this, pay some money, and make it work for my new app that I'm going to launch that's super cool. It has face detection, right? So that's another beautiful thing about APIs. You pay a little bit and you get a bunch of functionality that some crazy developers worked on in their basement for a while, right? So it's awesome.
So probably like Snapchat probably uses something like that.
Snapchat, I'm sure, does something like this, yeah. So this lady is also, emotion is happiness. But then when you get to this lady, is very confused. It's like, well, I don't know anything. Definitely not smiling, right? Who knows the actual age? It's impossible to tell, really, even for us. Head position, that one's pretty good. Ethnicity, white. You never know. It's hard to tell. This one's funny. I thought this one was funny. And it's like ethnicity, Asian, female. Threshold 50, definitely smiling, right?
How does it know it's Asian?
That's a great question. It's racist, I guess. I don't know. No idea what face detection tells you. It just makes assumptions. Anyway. Okay.
They're happy to leave them alone. Also,
So there are APIs all over that can do a whole bunch of things. They are very, very cool, right? Any questions on APIs?
and you get free API keys from that website.
Yeah, you can get free API keys. Okay. You don't necessarily have to use Mashape because it was kind of irritating. But we're going to go ahead and spend a few minutes experimenting with our own APIs. Go ahead and try to find some APIs. Go ahead and make some accounts or whatever if you have to, and play with them if you can, if it's easy, like the GitHub API. And see what you can get back. Spend like 10 minutes seeing what's up with APIs.
Hey, mobile is something different, right? For a mobile app?
For a mobile app? Nope.
SDKs.
Nope. APIs are on the web, man. You make a web request to them.
But if you're building an app, you would use an API.
Yes, you would.
Really?
Almost always. So that was a good question that Jay had. He said, if I'm building a mobile app, it's different. You wouldn't use an API, right? Well, I guess if your mobile app does nothing with the internet, then no, sure. It's just an application on your phone. But if you're doing anything with the web, especially from a mobile device, you need to use APIs. They are absolutely important to how mobile applications function. I can guarantee you there's probably not a single app on your phone that doesn't use an API in some way. Even the File Explorer, I'm sure does.
So is API a new thing or like an old thing?
APIs have been around since the existence of programming. Yep, they're very generalized in the sense that you can make something an API. It doesn't have to be on the internet. It's just the easiest example. But say you write a class in programming, like in JavaScript or something, and you expose some functions. That's the class's API. Say you write a little program that has a couple functions that you can call. That's the program's API.
Is there like an API that holds all your APIs in order?
No, because APIs generally aren't related to each other, right? So there's no reason to do that. When you find an API you like and you do something cool with it, post a picture of it in Slack or post a link to it in Slack or something. Share with us. I don't know if you're able to post to it.
Yeah, you can. I just don't know what.
Then get a response back and send us to JSON. I don't know.
But like, how do I make the request?
That's a good question.
Where would I make it?
If the API has, some APIs have stuff like available on their website to be like, here's an example request. Go ahead and try to make one. That's what the Mashape thing is supposed to do. But otherwise, you'd have to do it from code. If something's a GET request, I will tell you, if it's a GET request, you can do it from your address bar. You'd have to do it either with curl or Postman or in code, or various other tools that can do a post. So this is a tool right here I'll show you called Swagger that isn't a great example of an API per se, but it is documentation for your API that lets you build stuff to try out your APIs. So in here, I can see all kinds of information about an API. So say this one goes ahead and takes in a whole bunch of data here and gives me some responses. I can try it out. Oop. Which could be run like this from your command line. And then you get messages back. Like this is an example of how you could run an API. And it's saying I have an invalid input, right? So if I wanted to find a pet by status, I could try it out. There's all kinds of information you can pass in. You can execute it and see what we get back. We get a 200 back. This is the object I got back in JSON. It was an array with objects. I know this isn't super helpful, but basically you can see that if you find a website like this where it lets you actually try out API calls, it's pretty cool because you can see what's going on. So here's like an example URL of something that I might query, right, with an API. And it's got an endpoint called pet/find by status and with a query parameter status of available. And this is if I wanted to run it from the command line, I can run it using curl, a tool to make API requests and HTTP requests. I can pass all this in. The content type is application JSON. Now, if you were paying attention, like really kind of getting into the weeds with the HTML, you'll notice that the application type on HTML is either text HTML or like application HTML or something like that. Now we're doing application JSON because it's coming back as JSON blobs, right? And so here are like headers and stuff. So as we get more into HTTP requests, we learn about headers. Here's a whole bunch of information about them. But basically we get this successful operation by getting a 200 status code. And this is what we get back. Oop. Something that looks like this. That's JSON that you could parse. Anyway, this is like an example of what you could do with your APIs if you deployed them. You could build docs like this to have people be able to try them out. Imagine for testing, this is pretty amazing. I like that. Fuck off as a service. It's a nice one. Let's check this one out as a class. This is a good one. Provides a modern, RESTful, scalable solution to common problem telling people to fuck off. I'd love to stop and chat to you, but I'd rather have type 2 diabetes. That is an API response you can get from this API. This is a good one. I have never seen one like this before.
You could donate to CM Bitcoin.
So these are the things that you can do with your API. You can tell people to fuck off. This is a really good API. It's probably the best one I found yet. Good job, Heather. All right, what are the outstanding questions about APIs that people have? How do they work? What do they do? Their magic, a little bit. We'll be making our own APIs in this class eventually, when we get to Node. So after the first project and all that, we'll be doing it. But today, we're going to start talking to APIs, which is almost as fun. Did anyone else find anything funny or cool like that they want to share? That was a pretty good one, yeah. I'm sorry, but that's going to be hard to top. Alright, so another API that we're going to get pretty familiar with in this class because I guess Trilogy bought a token to it, so we have to abuse it, is the OMDB API. Everyone familiar with the website IMDb? Yeah, well, this is their database API behind the scenes. So if you wanted to get any information that IMDb has, you could use OMDB and just make an API call instead of going to their website. Now, we all know their website's covered with ads and kind of irritating, so this is a better way to do it. But we're going to use this bad boy. And it's pretty cool. Let me see. You can go up here to usage. Whoop. So this is what I was talking about when I said find a website that, you know, lets you try out the API. This is a good one. So we actually have a key. I wonder if it's going to let us do it. Here, I can type in a title. Forrest Gump. I think it was 1995. Oh, no. It was 1994 or 1996. Hey, 1994. Nice call, man. Nice call. Okay, so this is the response we get back. Now, it's kind of a mess. I know. But you can see the title is Forrest Gump, the year, its rating, it was released, the exact date, its runtime, so on and so forth. There's a ton of information you can get about each and every movie from the OMDB API. So, Jurassic Park. This one I think was 1996. So we'll find out. Nice. Oh, that doesn't look. Jurassic Park The Ride pre-show video. Nice. Not the one I was going for, but it's another good one, yeah. Runtime 48 minutes, genre short, director Gary Goddard, writer Gary Goddard. Ooh. Actors Richard Attenborough. Wow. Anyway, as you can see, this API is pretty cool. It gives you some information about how it works, right? So parameters, optional, a valid IMDb ID if you happen to have that, or T, a movie title for search, or type, movie series or episode, or Y, the year of release, or plot, short or full, or the response type, JSON or XML. Now we always want JSON. Don't worry about XML. It's going out the door and it's pretty terrible. So we always want JSON. Do we want a JSON-P callback? No, we don't. But and then the API version, right? So what do I mean by these parameters? Well, if you look here, these examples right here, I can actually go ahead and I'll open it in Chrome. Build a response in my browser. So Trilogy gives us a key. So when we see a URL, okay, http://image or img.omdbapi.com/ and then you'll see this question mark. That means we're starting something called a query string. Query strings are how we could send parameters to an API over HTTP through a URL. So the first thing we need is an API key. Next, you see API key, and then you'll see an equal sign, and then the word Trilogy. So this says the API key equals the word Trilogy. That is our API key. Then you see an ampersand. Okay, what does an ampersand mean? That means what's the next parameter. So for instance, Y is year. You could do year equals 1994. Okay, cool. And ampersand again. Let's do the title. Forrest plus Gump. Now, I did Forrest plus Gump because you cannot put spaces in a URL. If I enter, oh man, it exploded. Bummer. I did something wrong. Let's see if I can go back to this page and catch a valid URL. So if I copy this one right here, they created, which is similar. Oh, I don't want to do an IMG. I didn't give the API key, so I can't actually get a response. But if I add API key equals Trilogy, now I'm actually pinging an API. I'm querying the API from my browser. So let's try the Forrest Gump again. What? It says no API key. Here, I'll show you. No API key. Whoops, no API key. It's like, hey man, don't do that. With the API key, I get the full information about the movie. Because APIs are really awesome. So, what's important about the OMDB API? we have our base address, okay, www.omdbapi.com / and then we have the URL we're using to actually generate the information about what we want to get from the API, okay? So this is our query string. It's how we search and build a URI to tell the API what to get us. Who has another movie they want to search for?
Interstellar.
I'll do Interstellar.
Yeah.
Do you remember what year that came out?
2014.
This guy.
Like one of my favorite movies ever.
Okay, Interstellar. Look, it's got an 8.6 out of 10. Okay, it's a great movie.
That was a rookie number.
So, Interstellar by Christopher Nolan and his brother, I guess. It was an adventure, drama, sci-fi. Matthew McConaughey was in it. A bunch of other people. It won an Oscar. That's cool. Yeah, I like that movie too. It was great. But anyway, you can see a lot of information here. Now, the important parts again, we had to build a specific URL to get information. Okay, we had to tell it the title. Now, the title cannot have spaces, so use a plus instead. Ampersand, the year it came out. Ampersand, the API key. So let's see, what's another one? Plot equals short.
So how accurate is your query to be like you capitalize the I in Interstellar? If you don't do that, it would still find
That's a good question.
probably won't.
Oh, it's fine. Generally, unless your API is really bad, APIs are case insensitive. Okay, if you have a case sensitive API, it's either for a really good reason, or it's because you're not good at this. You made a mistake somewhere when you were writing this code. So, usually that's okay, but it's a good thing to test. That is a great question and a great thing to test. You should always check, hey, does the casing matter? Because it shouldn't, theoretically, right? Interstellar, still Interstellar, whether it has a lowercase I or not. So how accurate do you need to be? Well, everything needs to be spelled correctly. In terms of your casing and all that, depends on the API.
So if you just did year 2014, would it show every movie that got released in 2014?
Let's check. No, it does not like that. To that same question, if I get rid of the year 2014, will it still bring up Interstellar? Yes. I guess there's only one movie named Interstellar.
Oh yeah, what happens if you put, like what if you put Jurassic Park without the year, would it just bring all of them?
Did I spell that wrong?
Yeah.
It's 2 S's, right? Now it brought up the legitimate one. Probably because it did an exact match on the name. And the year was like, okay, well, I want something called Jurassic Park, but the year was 1996, which was 3 years off the original one. So I happened to find when they came out in 1996, there was nothing what I was looking for. So it did a little bit of fuzzy finding there for me, a little bit of a fuzzy search, right? It's like, well, you want Jurassic Park. This one's technically called Jurassic Park, and came in the year you asked for, so here you go. But in this case, it's doing an exact title match. So, depending on your parameters, that can affect the outcome too. Yeah, Peyton?
I don't know how important this question is, but will it search by, I mean, what the result contains, or like exactly? So can you do like Jurassic Park, or will it still find Jurassic Park since it contains that, or?
That depends on the API. So every API is different. That depends very much on their implementation. Nope.
No. Can you try a total recall since there's two with the same name?
Yeah, sure. Total plus recall. Brings back the original. So it must be doing some sort of search, and year is like a descending order or something where the older years are first. Would be my guess. But anyway, if you want to learn more about how the API you're querying works, you go ahead and, if I can find it again, generally you look for usage docs here, right? So they'll tell you some stuff sometimes. Like these ones aren't very good because they're not giving good information about how the API works. Yeah, it's not really telling me what exactly we can do to fudge the search a bit to make it look for things less strictly. But the spice search might be what we're looking for, right? So if we had the S parameter and we do Jurassic Par,
because we are searching for the title, we'll probably
wow, there's a movie called Jurassic. Yeah, so I don't know what this search one does exactly. But anyway, a lot of the, hey, will this work, will that work, will this work, are really API details. And it depends a lot on the creators of the API on whether or not they would work or what you can do to kind of make the searches work, right? So that is when it becomes very, very important to go to the docs and see what you can find out. Now, a good API has lots of robust docs on how everything works. This one does not. It tells you very, very exactly what it'll do, right? But those questions that we were just asking, those good questions, hey, I put a lowercase, or hey, I search for half the title, or hey, whatever, what happens? It doesn't tell us anything about those. It is very ambiguous. So that's how you know it's bad. Bad API docs. Bad API docs. They do okay. I would say they're not bad, they're okay. They at least tell us what we can do, right? But they don't tell us what we can't do. And here's a changelog too, if you're interested. Anyway, with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and select this out.
Oh, wow. If you take out the title and just do a search for like Jurassic Park, you will get all of them.
Well, go ahead and play with that yourself then, and see what you can find out. Spend a few minutes playing with this, and try to build some URLs. Now remember that API key is Trilogy, so you can play on that website in the examples, and then also spend some time trying to build URLs to find different movies based off of the usage parameters that are here on this web page, right? So use this stuff, build some URLs, just do it in your browser and see what you can get back. You can do it as partners or whatever, like have fun at your table, try to find some good stuff. Get used to using this API and understanding how it works and what's exactly going on. What's up?
So since we have this API, could we like, I mean, since we can use it, could we theoretically, like in our own website, make a little movie searcher like thing and use type 2014 and access the API to show, I mean, if it works that well, the API works that way. But.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we'll actually have an exercise kind of like that with this API. Also, we'll have a homework, or maybe Team Project 1, where you have to use an API like this to do something along those lines. So yeah, absolutely.
Try doing the Spotify one, but I couldn't do it.
The Spotify one's probably pretty complex. So there might be something to do with API keys and tokens, so you have to go through that process, and that's
You
a
have to
lot.
like register as a developer with Spotify to get access.
Probably, yeah. So it makes it a lot harder.
Like API is just like kind of like glorified databases in a way.
It's a way to get data. So sometimes, yeah, sometimes like this, it's just a glorified database of a way to get to it from the web, right? Sometimes it does a whole lot more. Amazon has an API they use internally to do all their cart processing, right?
Yeah.
So when you want to add something to cart, they have an API where you say, I want this thing in the cart, and it calls a bunch of other stuff to make sure that the entire warehouse and Amazon is going to get to, right? So yes and no.
I just did title A, and the only thing that came out was Star Wars.
What?
I don't. No idea.
That one is. I have no idea. Thankfully, no one but you guys are seeing back
Yeah,
there.
I mean,
You
it
don't
hasn't,
really need to
obviously
see
it's
it,
not a
but
big impact, but I was just curious.
I probably have to reroute all the sources and then it would work.
Yeah, you mess everybody else up.
No, I don't know.
Everything on the left on the path, you just replace with like full name, colon, full name, colon, cross. Just after the URL. Just after your URL, so it's gonna be like if you just put but like down to the asshole / if you replace like your name with from, then it'll return that back. If you copy that link and send it to
At the end of it, put a question mark, slide it back to mark. And then type API or the full API. Yeah, that's not gonna search anything out.
that's the one I was just gonna say.
And then you see, when I'm searching stuff, it shows you what links so like, not aware where. So if I just right there instead of F, you're like API key equals
Oh, it is the most intense thing I've ever witnessed. I was like sweating.
Yeah, I challenge, I've never been able to challenge I didn't think I was going to do this. I might be able to do this, but I'm not really sure. Clearly, I was. But
Rocket
I did it, and I did another. I was gonna do the half marathon in Las Vegas. I was gonna do that one, and I got sick. Yeah, they let me down. And that technically I did a lot of. And then I was gonna do half marathon.
You're like every period.
Because if you put the colon in it, it puts the colon in the text.
It was, I can't right now, there's nothing. Anyway, so I signed up to do that, and I started getting some. And so I would run, I started out, I'd run 5 miles, and then it was, I'd run 4 miles, and I had to run So I went through physical therapy, and then I was like, I'm just gonna take a break for a while, and I just haven't gotten back to it. I will eventually, but I really enjoyed it more than I thought I would. Yeah, it's been a while, too long.
Oh, whatever, so everyone, where was it down here?
I had almost exclusively outdoor running. If I was gonna do one, I just couldn't on the treadmill, tear your body apart, at least you're doing me.
I guess they just did it.
And it's boring.
Easier.
Yeah, it's not where it's not doable.
Well, and if you don't give it all the parameters it asks for, look at later. Server invites you to consider the truly monumental amount of buckets to give by your request. So would you think to do that? Don't put a URL, like put all one of them and then don't put a from.
That's great.
Oh, I already did, dude. PlayStation 3 free online games. Oh yeah, my favorite. They have my favorite one. I'm done. It's not here.
Okay.
I feel like PlayStation is one of those just because of Halo.
I like Halo's like the only like
Forza's great. It's like the best racing game there is.
Keep getting
Pretty cool. I feel like Forza's like the most realistic. Kind of.
play for Cyberpunk. I got 50 minutes of game. Did you play The Witcher?
I have it. I mostly watch people play it. I haven't played it a lot myself.
CD Projekt Red, their game. It's like a huge open world.
So on the OMDB API, if you want to find everything with the word in the title, instead of the T, use the S like I was trying to use earlier, and put the title, and you'll get everything. So in this case, I put Jaws. I got everything with Jaws in it. Even the most amazing Jaws of Revenge. Probably the best movie ever made.
You get a lot less.
They made a 3D movie in 1980.
Yeah.
3D even around back then?
Yeah, you do. But then it gives you the IMDb ID and the actual title and year, so you can specifically query it for the all together. And typically in an API, it's a good question. It's a good point you brought up. Typically in an API, when you can do a query of everything, they want to give you smaller payloads per item because they don't want the full payload to be.
Yeah, now we just call the one you want.
Yep.
Too many. The correct answer is too many. Land before time, 27.
I say still makes you.
Spy Kid.
Spy Kid was in 2018.
Wait, the last one was this year?
Yeah.
I don't think this is bringing up all the Land Before Times.
Oh, that's a great movie series.
Calm down. Shouldn't be so curious.
Can you search for like a director and see everything that a director made?
You have to look at the API and see if there's a parameter for director. I don't think so.
I want to see every Tarantino. 10 Shreks. 10 Shreks. Shrek the musical?
Well, but IMDb like takes things like the musical or like what he did for the Jurassic Park that he found like that ride movie, like script or whatever. Like they all put all that stuff on IMDb. But it's a Land Before Time. Now we're talking.
Looking for Veggie Tales. They didn't bring up any of the Veggie Tales actually. Sex, drugs, and veggie spring rolls. I probably spelled something wrong. Oh, that's Tails. I can't spell. Whoops. Come on, guys. No Veggie Tales? My God. What that? What is The Matrix Revisited?
There's probably a documentary or something like.
Probably.
This is how I lean back and oh my god, bro.
Is one word?
Oh, dude.
Yep. Nice. All right. So, are there any other questions about APIs that anyone wants to answer right now? Any other API questions? You guys play with APIs? Everyone kind of got an understanding? Let's do a fist of 5 on APIs. How do we feel about APIs? Good there? Okay, good. Good. All right, let's take a 15-minute break.
So like, I made an account for like that face plus thing you showed earlier.
Yeah.
So like, how would you use? I guess you can't use that in the browser then, like you would this other one, right?
You could build a front end for it, kind of like they have, where you upload an image and it sends the image data over to them.
Because it's a post. You have to use post.
Yeah, so you can't just use the URL.
Right. That's what I was confused about. I was like, how now do I use this thing?
There's a tool called Postman,
Oh,
and you could do it through there. Postman works really well. It's pretty easy.
that's like a website.
It's an app. Except you won't be able to view images, I don't think, so you have to take the data out and then render it somehow. But you still get the data back.
Okay. That's what just confused me. I was like, this is how you use it. Like, I thought I was missing a piece. Like, what do I need to install to call this thing?
Yeah,
I have no idea.
No, HTTP requests are just, they're still a mystery right now.
Yeah, I'm taking that one that Heather talked about.
Oh, yeah.
I'm planting that thing in the rain, randomly going through it on some website somewhere.
Oh, I bookmarked that one
needs
for
to be shared. Oh my gosh. That is so cool. I don't know, random chat buttons even too.
Sex, drugs, and veggie spring. Seven episodes. Television show. Oh, it's about the rock band Throwdown. Yeah, Throwdown. Awesome 5-piece rock band. Yeah. Well, I just put a bunch of links in there. Look at the one of those. And I'll just, put his name in all of them. So do what other guys do. You go, hey, what do you think of this? I know there's no pictures, but it's crazy. I'll tell you. My roommate watches this shit on repeat. My roommate literally watches every show on Adult Swim on repeat every week. Like every week he'll start a same show over and then watch the whole thing in like 2 days and then start the next one from the beginning again. And like we used to share office space. So like he moved his desk out. So when he was in that same room with me, like I would just listen to every show. So I know all of it, yeah. Like turned my back to it. Pretty much, yeah. Like I know every episode of everything that he ever watches. Terrible. It's really bad when you get to Arthur.
First few seasons I really liked, and then it just kind of
I don't like the animation style.
oh, okay.
Really picky when it comes to stuff like that.
So I kind of like when Matt and Bob's Burgers back and forth.
Yeah, but I love Bob's Burgers. Like Bob's Burgers is amazing.
Just getting him there and then there.
Yeah. That's always what gets me too. Like I won't be watching and then be watching one and I'm like, I pick up on the audible cues like, oh, this one is too much.
You gonna work after class?
You think it's 13 megabyte Parallax.
It could have been like 2 hours. Yeah. You never know. Like, I don't need work, then you're fuck it. We're having to eat all day.
Shrek horribly wrong. From some dude that's like 3.5 feet tall.
FBI raid your house and the guy was his son named Jason, so every time he talks about Jason, there's this part in the game where he turns into a Walmart. Detroit.
Yeah, I was like, oh. I enjoy playing single player RPG stuff. I don't know.
So wait, why did Barcelona let Neymar go? Why did Barcelona let Neymar go?
Alright, let's go. Compared to,
I don't know. I just hate getting cussed out by 11-year-olds.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
that's the shit that I can't handle.
Yeah.
It's like so.
By the way, I don't care about.
I know what you
It's
mean.
exhausting.
And they let
Like,
go.
when I have a 10-year-old say he's gonna fuck my mom, like, that's like where I kind of draw the line.
Wait, release
You know,
clause.
that's where the mute goes on.
Like, joke's on you, buddy. Have you ever seen my mom?
Yeah, like,
So he wanted to out it
Yeah.
There's a reason why I don't know. Yeah, no, like the only games I've ever thoroughly enjoyed playing single player are Prince of Persia. Specifically the older ones, like the 2004 ones.
All right. Well, when the rest of the class gets back, we'll start. Hopefully that's soon.
Start with that. It's my table.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I decided.
They're not here.
Really, hacking up in here?
Yeah, we're just about to start coding.
Really? Like hacking?
Yeah.
You're gonna hack.
The black hat hacking, man. Breaking into the government.
Has any one of your like students accidentally went onto the FBI website and then they got in trouble?
If you can go on the FBI website and do anything that'll get you in trouble, I'll be really proud of you. It'll take a lot of work.
This class gives me so much of like
What, the FBI website? Probably not that secure. I would put my bottom dollar in something like GitHub is probably more secure than the FBI. Probably similar to the FBI. Honestly, government agencies do a really bad job of
I was trying to apply to FBI for like a scientist position, but it's so crummy. They're like you know, the form and everything. You have to remember your password. I'm like, oh my god. I couldn't imagine doing paperwork there.
Yeah.
You broke it out.
Other people pissed me off.
Yeah, I got a spot for you.
Playing Division. That was a terrible game. Just when you get it.
Wait a minute, it had
You know they're making a second one, right?
I don't know where they all go.
Had the second one, but it was so redundant.
I went to Issue Road. I don't know here.
Oh yeah, they jumped to Whiskey Road and pound a couple before coming back to class. Don't get lost out there, man. We'll lose you too.
Carson, I'm already way ahead of this class.
Nice. Back to the console, man.
And that's the thing, I don't talk on the line.
You literally can type as much as you
Yeah.
And so I just sit there.
I used that website at my work once, and someone was like, hey, what are you doing?
Hey. Yo, yeah, where'd you guys all go?
There was traffic. Traffic.
No, you're fine. We're ahead of schedule, so it's okay. All right, so we're gonna get started again. And now we're actually gonna be looking at code, and then we're gonna be writing some code. So today's not all fun and games. We have some work to do. But the good news is, the hard part about understanding an API and how they work is hopefully come along far enough that this won't be too big of a deal. However, a lot of the code we look at is it's starting to get complex, okay? So what we're talking about today and the rest of this week, something called AJAX. It stands for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Now, what's funny about that is we don't use any XML, but that's okay. AJAX is just an acronym, basically, for something that basically means you can run JavaScript code, and instead of waiting for it to finish, you can go do some other stuff, and then when it finishes, it'll be like, hey, guess what, I'm done, here's your stuff. It's asynchronous. JavaScript is a synchronous programming language, which means that all of the instructions you see happen in the order that they are typed, right? So var title, creating a variable called title, happens before creating a variable called query URL, which happens before the AJAX call, which happens before this console log, which happens before these variable declarations, which happens before the last console log. However, AJAX introduces a new feature, which we've actually already seen, where this function right here that happens inside of .then is not guaranteed to happen right after we call the AJAX. It'll happen whenever it is done. Now, where have we seen this before? We've seen it in set timeout and set interval, where we can set a specific time that we want the function we give it to happen later, right? The only difference is this function happens when it's done, not when we tell it to. So we don't know when it's done, ever. We'll have no idea when this could be done. It could be 10 milliseconds, it could be 2 seconds, it could be 15 seconds, it could just time out. It could never finish, right? And we'll get into that, and we'll do some console logs to kind of see what's going on. But let's take a look at the AJAX request kind of breakdown. So we have this variable title, right? What we're doing is building that OMDB API query string URL right here, okay? So we have the T equals, and we're searching by title. We have the year, because we want to bring back the year. We have the plot equals short. We have our API key, which equals trilogy, right? So this is all very similar to what we saw in the browser, where we can query by the title of Space Jam and bring back a bunch of information related to it. Okay? So nothing new here, just we're doing it in code. Now we have our friend the $sign. Everyone knows who that guy is now, right? That's Mr. jQuery. jQuery does, you know, interesting things. What we've used it for so far is manipulating the DOM, but it has some helper functions that we can get to as well that aren't necessarily about that per se. For instance, it has this .ajax call. .ajax is a function that, you guessed it, makes an AJAX call, right? It's an asynchronous JavaScript request. And if you wanted to make an HTTP request, say a post or something, like we were talking about earlier with APIs, you could do it with AJAX. So the anatomy of this request is, well, one, it's an object that we're passing into the AJAX function, right? So right here, we have the curly braces, so it's an object. And remember, we know it's an object because it has a property name, in this case URL, a colon, and a value. So the URL, the value we're assigning it is this OMDB API URL that we have built that's going to search for Space Jam. The URL parameter in this AJAX object is the URL we are going to query. Okay, it's the URL we're going to call. Method is related to the HTTP method we are going to be using. In this case, it is get in all caps. When you have an HTTP get method, it basically means go get stuff from the API for me. Every time you are in your browser and you type in an address and you go to it in your browser, you are executing an HTTP get because you are telling your browser to go to some website and get HTML for you. And it does that. It gets some HTML and then your browser renders it. That's all that is. It's something like this, happening in your browser as opposed to in your web page. After that, we could be all said and done, but we'd never be able to get our response back, right? So there's this request-response hierarchy in HTTP calls. The request is, right now, for us to get information from the OMDB API, right? Then, with this .then function, we're going to need to capture the response. So just like our set interval and our set timeout, we pass in a function. It's an anonymous function, okay? Doesn't need to be named anything. We pass it into this crazy .then with one parameter called response. Now response in this case is going to represent our OMDB API JSON object. So remember when we're doing it from the browser and we're getting those big blobs of JSON back that said stuff about the year and the title and the plot, the director, runtime, so on and so forth, right? All this information about this movie, we're getting it back as a JSON blob. Well, turns out in JavaScript you can use JSON just like an object because that's what it is. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So we're going to get a JSON response back. We can console log it, and we can console log some of the properties of that object. Remember, it's just an object, so you can use the dot to get to its properties. Now, what's interesting is that .then function, even though we're creating it right here, does not happen at that moment. .then happens, like I said earlier, when the request is done, because it is asynchronous. Hence, asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Okay? It happens right here. The call is made. The AJAX call is actually made. And then the .then happens when it's done. Dot then is something called a promise here. And it promises that when it's done, it will give you something. That's literally what this function definition is saying. We're giving it an anonymous function where we expect a response back. We give it to dot then, and the promise is like, okay, when I'm done, then I'm going to give you a response, and you can do whatever you want with it. Now, like I was saying, the interesting thing is, because this doesn't happen right at this moment, we'll actually see these console logs happen before, most likely, we actually see the console log response in here.
Dot runtime of built-in functions in JavaScript.
What was that?
The dot runtime, is that a built-in JavaScript?
No, that is a property of the object that comes in from our response. So remember, this response is the JSON blob we get back from the OMDB API. And it'll have a runtime property. It'll also have a title property. It'll have a director, it'll have a year, it'll have a plot. And we'll be able to see it in the console.
I thought that was trying to like give you a time on how long it took to execute.
Ah, I see. Nope, I see how that could be really confusing. Nope, this is the response that's coming back. So anyway, let's go ahead and open up this HTML. So if I open up the Chrome DevTools and I look at the console. Okay, so remember there's that long console log. This console log will probably happen first because of asynchronicity. And then there's another one. We can also assign some variables while we wait too, because a whole bunch is going to happen. And then remember I added that console log. This is the then function. We console log out that object that comes back from the OMDB API, and this is what we get. Here's the actors, the awards, box office, so on and so forth. All the stuff about Space Jam, right? The year it came out. And then here's the runtime. And then it doesn't matter how many times I do this. We're never going to see this response, the then function, come in before those first two console logs. And you'll see, too, that there's a slight delay. You see the console logs first, and then there's like just a split second where the other stuff has to come in. And that's how long it takes that response to happen, that AJAX response to happen. So we're getting into some pretty advanced programming now, where we're getting into asynchronous programming, where we can't guarantee you when stuff's going to finish, so we have to prepare for it effectively, right? So again, we have our AJAX, and you call AJAX by just $.AJAX. AJAX is a function, has its parentheses, that takes in an object, right, which has some parameters. The simplest version has a URL. In this case, it's our OMDB API URL. And it has a method. In this case, it's get, as in go get me some stuff. It returns a promise. From that promise, we can call .then. .then accepts a function and gives you a response back. You can use that response when the function is called, just like in our set timeouts, right? You can call that function, or we can use that function when it's called by a set timeout. And you can do a whole bunch of other stuff while you're waiting, because you have no idea how long .then is going to actually take. Let's take a look at another example. Let's open up some.
Can you get a specific CDN for this, or just the jQuery one?
Any jQuery one will work. You just need jQuery. If you have the full jQuery, AJAX will be included. So this one's using 1.4 AJAX, but it's still jQuery min, so it'll be fine as long as you have jQuery. Anyway, what's interesting is now we can see what can actually happen with asynchronous requests. So we're calling several AJAX calls, and there is no guarantee in what order they will come back. It's possible they'll come back in this order, right? So we can actually, let's do a console log 1. We can put a console log number in there, and we can see what order they are coming back in. Now, like I said, the reason why we do this is because we can't make any guarantees with the .then when something will happen. So we can test that by putting numbers and seeing if they always come in the same order. If they do, take my word for it, we're extremely lucky. And there might be a reasonable explanation for it, but I don't want to dive into it too much. Anyway, so we're doing 7 different Ajax calls. We should theoretically get them in any random order every single time we call them. Probably we'll always get the first few first and the last few last because of how it works. But you can see here already that we're seeing that the order is severely off. So I put them, the console logs, in order of when they were called, right? The initial execution order. So it seems. But because they're in .thens, we can't make a guarantee. So a console logs 1, 2, 5, 3, 4, 6, and 7. So the pattern we'll always see is 1, 2, and 3 will be near the top. 5, 6, 7 will probably be closer to the bottom, usually. But it's not always true. Totally different scenario when I refresh. 4 came in first, then 1, then 3, then 2, then 5, 7, 6. Every time I refresh, it will be completely different. Because these are asynchronous calls. They happen in the order that they happen. There's no way to know. Depends all on the API and what you're getting back and all the bunch of other stuff. So, questions on these Ajax calls and what exactly they mean. Alright, we're going to go ahead and console log some stuff out. So right here, Romancing the Stone, we have our object, right? If we wanted to get to this, if we wanted to console log the title in console log number 1, Romancing the Stone, I go in here, go up here. How would I do that? Jaime. Was it capitalized? Okay. So if I go back here, yep, it was. And I refresh, you'll see in number 1, now I got Romancing the Stone. So here's another important part about JSON. Like I said earlier, and like I'll repeat again, it's just an object, right? So just like we were getting objects earlier, we saw the runtime in one of the responses. In the earlier exercise we did today, we were getting the first name, the last name of the object. You can go ahead and console log individual pieces of the object, see information about it. So console log, if I want to see the ratings, right, I can do response.ratings, and it comes in as an array, so I can even check the first one. This is on number 2. So for number 2, here's our rating, source, Internet Movie Database, value 8 out of 10. Now if I take a look at the Revenant, and I look at the ratings, rating number 1, IMDb, value 8 out of 10. Rating number 2, Rotten Tomatoes, rating number 3, Metacritic. Right? These are just objects that we can break down. Number 3, look at the runtime again. NA. I probably spelled something wrong. Oh no, the runtime's actually NA. Look at that. So the runtime comes in as not applicable for some reason on Father and Godfather. Probably because it's such an old movie. There's no applicable runtime. Now another cool thing you can do in the DevTools is if you want to inspect an object. So when you're working with an API, you may not necessarily know all the information you're going to get back from the API. So how do we do that? Well, we console log the response like we are doing, right? Let's say you want to manipulate it. You can right-click, store as a global variable. Then at the bottom, I have temp1, and then I can actually do temp1 dot title. right? And I can start inspecting the object here. So if I really want to get in with it, I can see all of the things that are on that object. I can start playing with them. This is a really good tool when you're testing out APIs and you want to see all of the different stuff that an API is returning back to you. It's simply just right-click on the object you see, stores a global variable. You'll see a little message telling you the name of the variable. In this case, it's going to be temp2, and then you can go ahead and use it like you would a variable. Yeah, Peyton?
So generally, would every, like, I guess in this instance, would every, like, movie have a, like, rating, even if it says, like, NA?
Yeah.
It would pull back something with that?
Yeah, so because it says NA as a string, we know that it's coming from IMDb. If it wasn't coming from IMDb, if it didn't have an actual value, it either wouldn't be on the object or it would be null. It would come back as literally the value null, like that. So it has a string, NA. NA was put there by someone at some point. It's not just an empty value per se. It's one that was explicitly put there. Okay, so activity number 3, Ajax to HTML. Oh, actually, activity number 2, I'm sorry. Activity number 2, you're going to get some code similar to the code I've shown you, and I want you to craft your own OMDB API URLs and start playing with the API from JavaScript. Console log the response you get back. Play with those objects you get back. Kind of try to understand when the .then function happens and what it does. Spend some time playing with that too. And we're actually going to spend 15 minutes doing this. So I really want you to try to build an understanding of everything that's going on in these Ajax calls. So it's activity number 2, Ajax OMDB. You can use in activity 2, these HTML files are in there. You can use them as a starting point and play with this functionality. No, you can literally use the file you find in there. You can use this single Ajax HTML. Play with the then function, play with the query, query URL, play with the console log, try to see what's going on in there and really understand it. Now, while you're still learning and trying to understand like how .dens work and all that, I really recommend you console log everywhere. Console log everything. Add so many console logs it blows your mind, so that you can track what's happening when and why. You may not necessarily know why, but at least when and where.
So there's really no rhyme or reason to how it responds back.
Not one that's able to be predicted though.
No, yeah, I noticed that. Like it's all over the place.
When it happens.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because you just like response out some of it.
Yeah,
We'll bring it back.
I feel like I saw it like last year and then it disappeared for a long time.
We brought it back to the anniversary last year, and then they sold so much of it that they decided to bring it back. It tastes exactly the same.
How'd you do that?
I did it the long way. I just made a div and thought I gave it a class of like it is a class, and then under query instead of console.logging it,
A little lighter.
call a jQuery function to combine the Puppet div. I want to use that to email into from the response.
What was that? Why is it responsive? That's just what we called it. Let's change the name to response and see what happens. Yeah.
But you can't just go straight in like console log.
Literally an HTML.
Country.
Try it. Try it and see what happens.
It's just a
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, I went to the API web page.
Oh, you mean that if you have keys, you don't get whatever.
Right, like this one doesn't use a key, so this website, like how we would message it in the browser. So I picked URL. Just a random one.
It's gonna change based on what you're looking for. So like, if you look at this URL that we got, you have all the way, you have the HTTPS all the way through that,
And in theory, you should be able to do that, use that list of all of those variants that show you on the
all that, the whole like,
it would be great if they had to get that it's giving you all these tabs in a list. And
That
you
makes sense?
pump all of those tabs into
So.
an array. So if the answer is looking into it, they're all using that action. And then you can cycle through them. After you spin it, you'll put it right there.
Console log the action object. Don't just console log the action country. Console log the object too, so you can get.
And then there's zero. How are we doing? Was response that way? So if you did another console log like underneath that, and you respond to that.
For what?
Just add a response bot.
Really? From the cloud thread?
is that one dude, man?
So now we're
for this? Oh, he moved?
Because everything
Dude,
is
he's
I'm
like,
just saying,
no, the guy does like the real estate?
more of the content on
Oh, no, that's all right.
everything that was in the object could be shown. Summer and stuff.
I got like, I got a letter in the mail.
I got something from,
I got an email saying $9,000 tax load.
yeah, so I got that too, and then I called up that client credit place, and they're like, nah, we got it all taken care of you. They're
Yeah,
like,
no, I got it twice. Like, hey, you need $9,000 right now. And I'm like, you sure? You get it?
What's up?
Great question. Wait, no, not, never mind.
Super secret question. Now you guys are playing with this, does anyone have any questions now? Anything else that's come up, where you're like, I don't really get it.
No, but I got it.
Did you get it?
He's like, nope.
Good.
Oh, here, here's
Yeah, I got the game my food too for $75.
So if I call the .ajax, when am I gonna get a response back?
Oh, look, it's so good.
Whenever, hopefully no one else is calling you at the same time.
Yeah, let's go, bro. You get,
Technically, the multiple one, for example, all of those are on the same giant.
Whenever it comes back, there's no rush.
How can I keep this?
Don't worry about it too much right
It's
now.
like, you know how they do the internet speeds, like once in your life, like it's really
Like, I like it.
Give me questions.
Don't want it to crash, but once you really get established in your.
I got a phone interview today, and I had.
You'll want faster internet. Let me tell you.
Our library, how I would run the library.
Oh yeah, how would you arrange the library?
But no, we had to get a $75.
No, dude, I'm saying, I called the client credit place, and they said that they don't charge you except, interest only until September.
Oh, well, I got like a $50 mail.
I didn't get that.
I got a pass through for
You're done.
$9,000.
You're done.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's coming down there.
I have ATM, ATM.
How do you inject
I think Russell Wilson for football.
new tags with big players? Like, I'm trying to create a new bid, like, big players, try to angle that with, so the assignments number two,
Yeah, number two.
I had to restart my freaking computer.
After or crap?
Just for some reason, like the same time, like every day, like
Mine gave me,
Windows, right?
that should create. Mine the internet just stops working. It's like you don't have an Ethernet plug in.
I bought an Asus too.
They created it.
And didn't put it anywhere. Yeah, it got so slow. Where it's
Well, like I already have a data card extension with HTML.
All about that.
That ID.
Yeah.
after it got better, you know?
Okay. So you can't. So you have to inject new things into the system. Like if I didn't have any divs on the, like does that, like this doesn't have any.
You didn't have any div, you didn't have any body.
So you call the body.
And then you do append to, you do .html, one of those, right?
128?
No. It's not a space, man.
Yeah.
No.
You append a table.
For a table, you didn't want that.
Have the actual element. So what does that look like? You're adding it right now.
Oh yeah, dude, this Pyro trilogy.
That a ping?
Trying to figure out how to do something.
Do what?
So I was trying to make it so you type something in, you click the button. Or like, essentially I was gonna test to see if you could like, if I could type in the movie name and then get the director, like to appear on the page.
So pull the director out of the response.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
How are you trying to do it?
Well, I have an input text box, but I can't get it to set as a variable when I push the button.
How do you get, so, what kind of handler are you
What kind of what?
handler are you gonna need? You're gonna need an event handler, right?
Yeah, so I got the click, and it's supposed to set the user input as, so I just named the button and the input. And then, so it's supposed to change this user input to whatever I type in there, but it doesn't work.
What is your console log out?
Just nothing, well, no matter what I type in there. Grab the URL.
I didn't catch it at first either, so. Yep, that'll do it.
This confuses me, cause like, I don't know, like the value of an input button is what the button actually says.
Yeah, the value of the button is the, but the value of an input is the text.
The way I did, I
The value of a number box is the number, stuff like that.
I just made a div, gave it a class, and injected it with.
Okay, so while we're working on this, you can keep working on this, but there's an activity we're going to jump into. I'm going to show you really quick. It is this. So this is an HTML table that shows some data that we got from the OMDB API. So what you're going to have to do is, you're going to be getting information from the OMDB API and loading it into HTML, basically. So we're going to have to manipulate the DOM. You can see here, I've got some p tags, I've got a table. Let's see if we can, you won't be able to see it. You're going to have code very similar to what we've seen. Here, let me pull up your code. In this last example we played with. So you're given a basic table. You're going to have to insert some movie rows, right? You're given a basic AJAX request, and then you need to go ahead and take that AJAX request and get information about all of the, a bunch of different movies, just get as many as you can, and inject them into the table. So you're going to have to be taking advantage here of AJAX and jQuery together. And I'll go ahead and slack out the instructions for you. Any question, Matt? So you have to make a couple of index requests, right? So you want 3 movies. So you're gonna have to use multiple index requests. You can't 3 movies per movie. And take information about the name of the movie, the year, and the actors in it, and insert them into the table. So you have to create relation elements, jQuery, table elements, table rows, as a matter of fact. You have to add the value as text that you're trying to get out, right? So the name of text, the year text, and then you can append them to the table. Yep, take the movie, stick it on the table. So just start with 1 movie. Are you going to be putting relation on yourself, or are you going to be dynamic and other? Yep. So what's the name of the movie? Okay, so keep it in. Oh, variable. Put Blade Runner in there. Let's get the request then.
Oh, right here?
Yeah, that's the first movie. Now, can you put spaces inside of the,
No, just put a plus.
Okay, so now, we're already making the AJAX call. Once you console log the response object, you see it has it. You need to console log the response, where do you see that? So here, if you open the console, should be able to see the console. And then you'll see the name, the year, and the actor. Right?
Yep.
Cool. And I know what the object looks like, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So now, let's work this in. Why don't you take the movie name, the year, and the actor, and put them in 3 separate variables after you get that response. You can go, you don't.
No.
Go ahead, go ahead. Let's see.
It's a movie. Didn't know the director of. The movie is?
Yeah, so remember, you can the name, the year, and the actor. So create 3 separate variables.
It works. I just made a movie director searcher.
So as soon as
So you created 3 variables, and now we need the actual actors, and the year, and the movie name from that response.
Yeah. So,
You need to assign the variables to the response. How do you do that? You can console log this console log it. How do you assign the variables?
yeah, you can only
Yeah. So you gotta assign them to the variables, right?
yeah.
So how do you do that? Well, you have the variable name. What do you want to put in there?
so like if an API allows you to search for a table
So movie plus.
Yeah.
or under one keyword, right? But then
Well, you already have the variable name, right? You have the string actor.
Yeah.
What do you want then on the variable? Tell me.
Yeah.
that is going to create
You want the actor's name? Okay. So,
Put it outside,
so then name the variable, set it equal to
everything else on can be
the
outside.
actor's and the response. So below your console log response, that's where you're gonna set. Because that's where you have it.
Yeah.
So how do we assign something to a variable?
yeah, so you like
As a string variable, you do it as a
before the dot.
Property to,
Maybe I can name.
BigQuery.
How do you read that? I said, how do I take the variable name? So I said, how do you do that?
Or you could create a group and then that when you do it in your yeah, you would do it inside that dot net inside that one dot net. You put dot net outside the variable name.
Just want to make it all
You rewrite the entire dot.
So you do another game code.
Yeah, so
instead of saying, create send equals to the after, you already told me how to get the after. What is on the
so your search parameters are already going to go find you that I got so that'll be your response. And what you do is
How to log in every day.
when this anchor call is complete,
And I did the same thing with
right?
the title.
Now in the variable option, you can show it, but you build a row to display.
Well, I built a row here, this row is.
So basically what you do is,
They don't want to be, are we supposed to charge over the
You could do that. That's an option. So I don't know if you know, Kirkland said you basically need three different ones. Three different. Great, you got your three variables. Now, you can create your table row. A table rows HTML tag looks like.
Gambling is calculated. Calculated gambling. I always finish the top.
In here, you're close, and you want to TR,
But I always finish the top because I just live and breathe that. Stats, numbers, formulas. Yeah, I draft tomorrow. I have a draft tomorrow. Oh, like the NFL season starts not this week, it'll be the week after. It's the last preseason game.
Of your
What?
Now in the
They
row,
did pretty good yesterday. They
you
beat
need to create
Cowboys.
three elements.
Yeah, we've had good preseason so far.
Just like you create a row, do the same thing three more times. So you're gonna have to make these to represent the columns. What are these columns gonna represent? They're gonna represent the name, time of year, right? So why does it have column name, column title, column year? Oh yeah, it's not a variable title. Right now, it's column title. So you already have your row defined, you create a variable above. You don't need for me to do paperwork, but you could do like title, TOL, title column, something like that. Yeah, right. So what you're doing, right, is you're basically inside the row, you're putting in the three variables, the title, the year, and the application, exactly. Okay, so now you're just recalling. So you gotta put the relevant information inside the column. So what do we use to put text inside the dictionary?
What's that? Well, yeah, I'm so busy. Clicking for this last one.
No, it's elementary.
Yeah.
What do you have? Even needed dollar when you were like there.
T-body elementary school. So do we have to give the T-body an ID or something?
Visualize this complete.
That's the only way I know how to get it.
So what are you gonna put in the title? So that's what I'm, yeah. So now you have a row, so they don't want to touch the single body.
No,
So
not
think of it
yet.
like here, you're building the table bigger than like
No,
this,
no,
so
no,
like, build it into the smallest block. You have the row, three elements inside, then you gotta take that row, you gotta put it in your table. You gotta put it in the body of the table.
So that's kind of the first.
Yeah, well, I'm just gonna kind of explain,
Exactly.
like, from here.
And
Well,
this
down.
is,
So,
yeah, and this,
inside
you're
that
just
object,
appending
we're
it,
putting
each
a URL,
one to
the
the row,
URL.
and then now you're gonna take this row, and you're gonna append it to
That
the
body
row
is
where
gonna
you
go back.
slide.
Yeah.
Table.
How many body pieces are there?
Like,
So, all those are
I
gonna
guess
go
where I
back.
would get confused is more the
Body.
new rows and columns.
Are there methods for appending more through something? See? So, and all it's saying is, so now you've added the HTML to the column. Now add columns to HTML to the row. That's the order here. So we're gonna have to add the same person every year and then add.
Are you trying to figure out how to access it?
Figure out so all of this right here.
Okay, so let's do
You
that.
have the name column, you're talking about the tower, right? The year column and tower. Now we grab the body of the table. We grab the row. Okay, within that row, I want row, type row, and the name, and then the body. And a bunch of functions. HTML work with three together in the row. Yeah, you just. So what is something that could use in the area of three different things? It should be the same thing. Right. Yeah. Sure. Going to do that one time for each of those columns.
Okay. Alright. So, that looks like the movie variables that I started exploring using my URL. All of the properties. Now let's go back to the code real quick.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Miller.
Right. Alright, so let's move that browser right there. And I wanna show you.
Make sure you're getting everything back from the response pages, like they can sometimes go log off.
Yeah, in the browser, they got an AREF call. So, yeah, and that API can just follow that. You want to put some of these properties that are covered on
So now, append the row,
So,
T-body.
inside that,
If you select the T-body, and you select the data,
inside that callback, you're basically gonna access the object. Yeah, because that object, although you can't see it, it's red, right? When you make that call, the response comes back.
and then just an element, if you create the T-body element.
In order to access
That's like for an element or?
inside of that callback, you're going to response dot property name.
No.
Right, so let's go back here. I want you to do another one.
Exactly, this is like T-body, this is that one. The important part is making sure you get all your T-body, and then it just means kind of only leave it, not just.
Oh, there's a reference in there, right?
Yep, yep, so now, what if we just use to append the columns in the row?
Row?
So now append the row to the T-body.
Right now, you can see that.
Well, what are we putting here? I'll just look for it. We're putting in the row, right?
Oh, yeah. No, not that. Yeah.
Oh.
We're trying to avoid using Java script and jQuery instead of just going into Alright. Oh, now you see
So,
that
we missed something up on the
array.
row.
So as you can see,
So go ahead and try to take it back, you have to do one more time to do it.
the object is not physically there, you can't see it, but you can actually access it. So you can just in your browser knows it's there. So basically you can go to the code note there, so you just see what it is, response.property, and so what I want to do
That maybe you push it over and then you go back.
Yeah, well, I made it with
There's two ways to do it.
find the selector, or you can find the selector and then so it doesn't give
I just sent you the jQuery how to make the
So before you get covered from the watch, putting it in your people, a lot of people are getting on that.
I'll show you the demo, but I want you to,
It's 3 for API and JSON, it's like 336.
So what are we gonna do? So we're definitely gonna get T-body in there, because you actually see what the row is. We're gonna go over this class. I would love to help you, but we're running out of time. Alright, so we went over on this activity because I wanted to make sure people had time to work on it and we could try to help everyone, and I don't think we got to everyone, unfortunately, but we're going to go over this one as a class real quick, and then I'm going to cover one more thing, and then we're going to go over the homework, and then we're going to go home, okay? So... Okay, what we needed to do was go ahead and get ourselves a movie from the OMDB API, and we needed to inject that movie into our HTML as a table row. Okay, right here where it says insert movie rows here. So there's a lot of moving parts to this. The nice thing is it's all going to happen in this then function, okay? So we're going to go ahead and together we're going to go and follow the steps. So first thing, obtain a reference to the T-body element in the DOM. So we're going to go ahead and assign it to a variable. Remember, we use our jQuery $, open parentheses, and quotes, and it's just an element. It's not a class, no dot. It's not an ID, no hash. It's just an element. So we tell jQuery to reference it just by the element name. So now we have the T-body. Create and save a reference to a new empty table row.
var new row. We do our jQuery, right? Open quotes. Now, right here, we're referencing the t-body. If we want to create a new element, what's different, Rolando? We need to put the whole tag in the jQuery call with the angle brackets and all, right? This tells jQuery, hey, yo, jQuery, instead of selecting an element by its element name, I want you to give me a brand new element because it's a whole new tag, right? So now we have an empty row. Create and save references to 3 TD elements containing the title, year, and actors. Okay? So we need 3 TD elements. So we'll call this one title TD. We just created a TR, right? So we know how to create an element now. We can do the same with the TD. I'm going to copy this. We'll call it year TD is the second one, and actors TD, the third one. Now what do we also have to do? Well, from our response, we have to get the title, year, and actors out. So in the title TD, we can append some text, and we can put in the title. From the year TD, we can append some text, and we can put in the year. From the actors TD, we can append some text, and we can put in the actors, right? And before we get too far, I'm going to change this to the matrix. Okay. So append the TD elements to the new table row. So we have our new row dot append, right? Just like it said. Title TD. We're going to append the year TD. And we're going to append the actors TD. And then append the table row to the t-body element. So we have our t-body, append, new row. If I open this with Chrome, there it is. Now notice that it loaded the page, and then at some random time later, it added in the matrix, the year, and all the actors. Right? So the other part of this assignment was doing this several times. 3 times to be exact. So there's one way you could do it is to simply copy and paste all this. That's the easy way, okay? But how could we do that the less easy way? What's another good movie? Is it E dot T like that? If they ever say in any code to repeat something, 9. Yeah, not like that. You use a for loop or some form of a loop. As a programmer, work smarter, not harder, right? Less code means less work. But something's gotta change. So within the scope here, we can actually var movie equals movies dot I. Right? Go ahead and open this here. Forks. Boom, boom, boom. Now watch. Let's see if they come in the same order every time. They do not. Because the thens do whatever they want. They are pure black magic. Okay, so this was a review and new stuff. We had our Ajax call, which has our .then. And inside of our .then, we have a whole bunch of jQuery to do. We have to go ahead and get the t-body. We have to create a new tr row. We have to create 3 new TDs. These are columns. It's table detail is what it stands for, but they're considered columns. Then inside each of those columns, we need to add the relevant information. In this case, from our response, we needed the title, the year, and the actors. Then we need to go ahead and append those 3 to the row in the order that we saw up here. Movie name, year, actors, right? To get them in the right order, and then you can go ahead and append them to the t-body. Let me slack this out. All right. Any questions on this assignment? I noticed a lot of people were struggling on the jQuery here. I get it. jQuery is hard, and it's hard to remember all the crazy syntax, and we're moving really fast. But nail this stuff down. If you need to go back and review this syntax to remember how to do it, do it. Because it's only going to help you, okay? And don't overthink things like create a new variable and store blah, blah, blah in it. You know, create a new variable and store the actor in it. If I wanted to get the actors out, I could create a new variable and store the actors in it, right? By this point, we all know how to create variables, and we are sort of comfortable with getting stuff from objects, right? Don't forget the basics. When it says create a new variable, that never changes. Var, variable name equals. Boom, new variable, right? Never changes. It never will. Okay, so moving on. I am going to open up one last example that we were going to go ahead and do, but we are out of time. There's a website called Giphy, and if this thing ever loads, Giphy returns GIFs that come in as crazy, crazy data. Okay? But at the end of the day, it has the name of the image, or the type of image, has some ID stuff, and it also has the URL that points to the source, which is pretty nice. And this is in an array called data. So, if I go ahead and open up the code, in our body, let's go ahead and div images. Let's see what this bad boy can do. We can go ahead and use jQuery. We can get the images div, right? I equals 0 less than response dot data dot length. Now remember, we just saw the array is called data because we console logged it, right? So let's create a new image. I'll set the source attribute equal to response.data i.url. And then we will do images.append image. Dang. Let's take one of these. Let's see if it comes up in my browser. Sure does. Ooh, wow. How appropriate. Right after I failed at my code. Okay. Let's go ahead and just to verify, let's console log. Console.log response.data I. And let's see what exactly is going on. We should have a bunch of elements in our images with sources. Why is it not? I don't know why it's not loading these.
It would be like an alt or something, would it?
Yeah, but that shouldn't stop it from loading. I suppose they're not real images, they're just URLs to
Yeah, that's the
Bitly.
like the source of that actual image.
If there's this Bitly GIF URL, that might be the one we need.
Yeah. It's really,
What?
or we can just right click the image, copy source to
.gif at the end of the URL? Nope. Whoa, did not do that. Slug. Anyway, I can't figure out how to get it to work, but Bitly GIF. Let's give it one more shot. I wanted to show these. And it is just not digging it. Bummer. Anyway, the point is, there is a Giphy API that allows you to go and find a whole bunch of images. And oh, maybe I did something wrong. That allows you to go find a whole bunch of images, and then you can append them into your code if you figure out how to do it right, which I apparently can't do. There are some API docs about it that I'm going to go ahead and link out, and we can experiment with it later, but we're running out of time. And here is also a link on how to use the Giphy API on YouTube. And this is activity number 4. So if you wanted to find this code and you wanted to play with this at home and actually try to make it work, unlike myself, you can find it in there. Activity number 4, the GIF activity, Giphy API, right? So I know there's a way to do it, and oh, wait, no, we're already getting the response. And it's probably something to do with this. There's probably some parameter you can pass into the API to give it like a specific image source. And I'm just being stupid right now. But like I said, we're running out of time. So just note that there are other APIs out there that work very similarly, and they give you objects back that you can then manipulate. So we have to go over the homework. Oh, there's Jesse's correcting me on Slack. There is a... Oh, here they are. Image, and then there's a preview GIF URL. So this is a very, very complex structure here, right? Because we have to go pretty far down.
Did you talk about that second to the bottom with the preview underscore GIF?
Yes. Preview Git. Hey! Thanks, Jesse. Good looking out. Anyway, yeah. So we got a pretty complex object back, right? That has a whole bunch of information. You can dig all the way down in that object to find different types of images. So one of them was a preview GIF URL. There was also a preview URL, and there was like 30 other types of images that you could use for these Giphy GIFs. But these are really cool. Being able to go through Giphy, and there's also like a search query parameters that you can use to search for specific. I'm so tired right now. Specific images. So it's just another API that's pretty cool, and I select out some resources to help you with that. Anyway, that being said, let's go ahead and look at the homework. Here is the instructions. I'll open up the... Yeah, I'm going to open up the video for you. The video is right here in this folder. To show it, you'll just double click it and then have to pull it to the right.
Okay.
Yeah, Firefox is open.
Awesome. Hey guys, let's go over the homework real fast. And this week we're going to do a homework called Giftastic, and basically in this assignment you'll use the Giphy API to make a dynamic web page that populates with GIFs of your choice. To finish this task, you must call the Giphy API and use jQuery and JavaScript to change the HTML of your site. That's called DOM manipulation. So basically, before you begin, fool around with the Giphy API, watch the demo video, and then, to submit on BCS, you'll submit both deployed GitHub IO link and the link to the repository, and that's really important because we'd like to be able to see your code. So please do both of those links. So before you can make any part of your site work, you need to create an array of strings, each one related to a topic that interests you. Save it to a variable called topics. So basically, if we go back to this, you can see all these topics that are kind of pre-populated up here. Each one of these topics is going to be one that, here on this one it shows animals, but hold on, let's see. Let's go back there. Oh, and okay, so they chose animals. Your app should take the topics in this array and create buttons in your HTML. So basically, of the different topics that you put in, you want to have a bunch of buttons populate. When you click that button, it calls the Giphy API and sends back a bunch of GIFs that match that key term on the search. So it says the page should grab 10 static non-animated GIF images from the Giphy API and place them on the page. That's pretty specific, non-animated GIF images. The reason you'll want to do that is because animated GIF images are pretty heavy, so it's going to take a long time to load. When the user clicks one of the still Giphy images, the GIF should animate. If the user clicks the GIF again, it should stop playing. I guess they want the full GIF, and then it animates and then stops. So under every GIF, display its rating, PG, G, and so on. That data is provided by the Giphy API. It's going to be inside the response object that you get back. And then add a form to your page, takes the value from a user input box and adds it into your topic. So if you're a user, you can add a topic, click on that button, and then make a call, and then deploy your assignment. Go look over your minimum requirements, and then if you're doing really well and you want to do bonus stuff, feel free to do bonus stuff, but I would say don't get caught up in doing the bonus stuff. Worry more about the logic. And as you guys can see, their solution is very simple. So I wouldn't worry about making it super fancy unless you want to. So let's go ahead and we're going to go over, we'll watch the video real fast. Here it is right there. I guess they're showing you the HTML. Do what?
Pulls a bunch of images, 10 images, from the Giphy API of a hamster. And when I click on it, it moves. When I click again, it stops. That's actually pretty creepy. So I'm going to go over here to Skunk and click on this. And Skunk's, well, and then click again. And that stopped it. Sometimes it takes a few clicks to stop it, I'm not sure why. And I go over here to Bird. And if I click on, let's say, this one, stop it. And I can add animals to this list. This list of animals is actually being populated from an array that I put in myself. I put an array of animals, and then I looped over them and made these buttons. And when I clicked on each one, I'm hitting the Giphy API with the value of the button to the Giphy API to bring me down 10 GIFs of a bird. And now if I add in, let's say, falcon, it adds a falcon button. It added a falcon into the array. And now if I click on this guy, stop it, and let's click on this guy, stop it, and that's your homework.
Alright, so are there any questions on that homework? Alright. Do what? Yeah. So I would go in there and lock it in. Yeah. That's like the first thing I've seen. Yeah, it looked like HTML only, but you know, I mean, anything really helps. Yeah. But I would say with something that's advanced like this, pseudocoding is gonna help the most.
We'll find out the due date and we will post it.
Yeah.
We gotta figure it out because it's all jacked up down there 2 days off. Maybe. We'll make sure.
So is this Saturday's homework still due?
Yes, this Saturday's homework is still due this Saturday, even though you have class off. It's messed up, well, you'll deal with it.
I thought I guess I didn't look at the donation cost, but I was under the assumption